our little interactions over here on the screen because we want to interact with you guys. It's Black History Month, so what we're talking about starting tonight are things that impact the Black community. That's just going to be our focus for these couple of weeks coming up during Black History Month. We're going to be talking about things that affect our mental health, things that affect our emotional health, things that affect our physical health as a Black community. But if you are an ally and you are here, we want you to join this conversation. So if you're not Black or if you're not impacted by the types of things that we're talking about over the course of this month, that's okay too. We want you to get involved in the conversation. So below, go ahead and share. Tell us where you're from. Like, comment. We want to hear from you guys. We're sharing it right now onto our personal accounts. So come join the conversation. If you haven't been here, I'm Dr. Monica Rippey. This is Miss Josephs and this is Paris. We are on the team at Ascend Wellness Services, and we take care of all of you and your wellness, and we believe in holistic wellness. So that's what we're doing here today. We are going to jump in really quickly today. It's a little different than usual, but as you guys come in, just say hey to us, and we'll make sure to say hey a little later. But this week, we're going to start off by talking about disparities. Can you define for us what a disparity is?
Disparities are things that put us at a disadvantage, whether it be in healthcare, whether it be in education. Disparities means I don't have the opportunity or things are not extended to me. Disparities within mental health and within healthcare also involves equal access to things. You also, though, have people in rural communities that just being in a rural community is a disparity. It's a barrier. And also when I think about disparities, I look at it on the level when we're talking about the Black community. So when I think of disparities, I think of the difference between equity and equality. And a lot of time, I've been doing some research on that, and most often than not, those words are used synonymously, like equity and equality, but they're not synonymous. For the benefit of the conversations that we're going to have this month, we're just going to have an overview of some of the things that we're going to talk about in Black History Month. But equity, just so we're clear and just so we're giving clear explanations, equity means that you have what you deserve. Like when you have disparities in the Black community, a lot of times the answer or the call from the healthcare system would be equity. So we're going to go into this community that is predominantly Black, and we're going to give them what they deserve.
Right.
We're going to give them what they need. But what I have learned is that equality is quite different. Equality means everybody's the same. So we don't have to make differences or differentiate about what we're going to do because this Oprah thing popped in my head when she said, you get a car, you get a car, you get a car. Right. That is what equality is. So I think sometimes that we need to kind of push the envelope and push what we do as people to even move past equity and move into a space of equality.
That's so good. That's so good. When I start to think about issues related to disparities as a nurse, as a healthcare worker, a lot of times I begin to focus when you're giving that analysis, like you get a car, you get a car, you get a car. The funny thing about those moments is when those people get those cars in Oprah's previous, when she had her talk show, when they get those cars, it's not related to their income. They didn't fill out any type of thing. Well, as far as we know, we were sitting at home watching, but there was nothing in the check boxes that like you get a car because you got an education, or you get a car because your family has money, or you get a car because you haven't had this trauma that keeps you from doing this thing, and so when you look at it that way, using that analogy, equality is all about saying we hope that everybody has access to the kind of care they need. This week we had posted on our personal Facebook page on Ascend Wellness Services a statistic about, and can you pull that up, on our page. It was a
Sure,
statistic
sure.
specifically about the Black community and mental health. And it talked about, I want to get the exact stat, 63% of Black Americans believe that a mental health condition is a personal sign of weakness.
Yes.
In our line of business, we have to come and talk about that today. We have to talk about the 63%. That is, I mean, if it's more than 50, that's most of us. That's your mother, your brother, your cousin, that's your sister, that's your best friend, that's your best friend that is family. There are people walking around, especially after this last year, that are experiencing sadness and hopelessness, feelings like that, anxiety, depression, other things that we see in our practice that feel like it's a personal failing to themselves. So sitting here, since you're kind of like our point person on our mental health, what would you say about the stigma of the stigma that's placed on mental health? Like, what would you say are there ramifications of that? What goes on with that? How did that come to be, and why is it a thing too?
I can honestly say that as a licensed therapist, when I sit with people or when I go into the community. I know those barriers are there. I used to have a professor, and she would say, we would ask her a question, I said, well, I want to talk about disparities in the Black community. She would look at you and she would say, well, who cares? And it would kind of take me aback, but I learned the further and further I went into my advanced studies that what she wanted was, who are the stakeholders? Who are the key players in this situation that are going to even care about the fact that you want to go into a community and fill a gap? And I have to say, over the tenure of my clinical mental health career, I have done, and I will always do pro bono work. What does that mean? I always go back into my community and I serve. Because a lot of time are those barriers, there are those stigmas.
Right.
So when she asked me who cares, what I did is I went about doing the research. So I poured hours and hours of research into mental health care and the Black community. And we're just gonna go on and get to the nitty gritty in the bottom of things. So I was in a community where 73% of the households were female led. And so I had the competency to kind of understand that dynamic. I understand, and I know we're going to throw some words out, and we have all month to kind of piece this out and break it down. But there are things in the African American community called enmeshment, meaning we are communal.
Yeah.
We mold together. So it's kind of like, you don't really have to be my cousin to be my cousin. We work that way. And so because I understand that as an African American counselor, I kind of bring that in the space. On the same token, and these conversations, we're going to sit in the uncomfortable space a little bit this month. And we just ask you guys, and again, we'll make this disclaimer. If you're not African American, I have some phenomenal non-Black friends. I have some phenomenal white friends who journey through life with me. We sit down, we sit in those conversations, and they literally hear me. They see me and they hear me. And that's kind of really important. So as a woman, I am also, for my faith, I anchor myself in Christianity. I do. So two things that are going to walk in the space when I walk in the room is my Blackness, I can't hide that, and my Christianity, I try not to hide that. And why do I say I try not to? Because I think sometimes just because you say you're a Christian, you don't always personify.
Right.
I'm going to cop to that. Like, I can go back, it's just as simple as being in Kentucky Fried Chicken hangry and just my face all twisted up. That's not kind. That's not loving. So I'm always aware of those things when I walk in the public. I will say this. I have had pushback for saying, hey, I am a Black therapist, or a Black woman, or a Black. I have not had as much pushback if I say, oh, I'm a Christian woman or a Christian therapist. So it's just small nuances like that that stifles the voice. And so when I go in my community, I want to go in my community with a solid voice. It is okay for you to have struggles. We all have to say that over the last month, everything, the most important thing, I agree, Christy Meredith, I do. And so the most important thing is not that we shy away from the conversations of disparity in the Black community and things like that. It is that we lock arms with people. We lock arms with people. I will say this, and Christy Meredith, I'm going to put you on a teeny tiny blast. Not a real big blast, but a teeny tiny blast to say, Christy Meredith is one of my Caucasian friends that I can I can discuss the disparities I have. I can discuss them just because I went on to go to advanced education. And with education comes social mobility, comes more open doors that swing wider. And I feel it's important for us to be talking about these conversations because those things were not always afforded to me.
Right.
I have been in the group of disparity.
Right.
In my lifetime.
I think that's so important too. Like if you guys are out here, you guys are looking for therapists, you're looking for doctors even, because we're talking specifically about mental health right now, but there's a lot of disparities we're going to talk about within the healthcare community as well. If you're out here looking, try to look for somebody who's been where you are. Sometimes I think it gives you a different perspective as a caregiver when you're caring for other people if you've been there yourself.
Yeah.
But I do know, I was reading this statistic when I was pregnant. My baby is 5 months now, and my husband, he's probably watching at home, but she's 5 months. I remember Ethan, my husband, calling me one day and saying, hey, did you know that I just read this article that Black women that have babies, if their doctor is Black, they have better health outcomes? Like their baby and them are more likely to both live and not have any complications if they're taken care of by a Black doctor versus a white doctor.
Yeah.
And this is actually an actual study. Like you can go find the study, you can read the findings. But there was some evidence there, and he looked at me, and my husband is not Black, but he looked at me and he said, I'm so happy that you're going to see a Black doctor. My OBGYN is Black, but because I know that you would be safe there.
Yeah.
And that's something that we never consider, not never, but we don't often consider when we're going out to choose our healthcare professionals. Look at who has good outcomes.
Yeah, actually, just to add on to that, I was writing this research paper about adolescents of color and their perspective to certain things and aspects of America specifically, and I did actually see when they have Black teachers or teachers that look like them, therapists that look like them, when there's people around them that are adults that look like them, that are in higher forms of education, that way they feel more comfortable than when they have teachers that don't understand their struggle, don't understand what it's like to be like them. And so I see that they're more comfortable.
That's that representation.
Yeah.
We've got to talk about representation when we have this conversation, because I think sometimes when you look at that, 63% thinks it's a personal failing. I think that's for a number of reasons. One, I would say, when I was growing up, I didn't hear any of my Black peers talking about them or their families being in therapy. Never. Like, I never heard anybody say, I'm going to my therapist. Right? And there could be a number of reasons, and we would have to look to research that. But another huge reason for us, too, is a lot of people in the Black community find their solace and find their peace in faith communities, too.
Yeah.
We're very entrenched in the church.
In the faith
and so we're going to be talking about that. Can we touch on it a little bit tonight? But we've had such a huge conversation, we're going to have to talk about it more.
Yeah.
But can you talk to us a little bit about the stigmas on mental health and the church community?
I will. I want to preference what I'm going to say with this about us. And this is something that we stand on. Like, that same professor that talked to me about who cares, she also said one time, I said, well, in my opinion, she said, well, Miss Joseph, you really don't have an opinion. I was like, I I am 40 at that time. You know, I got my AARP cards. I'm so proud. But at that time, I was like, oh, yes, I am surely I have a beat. But what she was trying to say is go out and do your research. If you're a theologian, go do your research. If you're a doctor, go do your research. If you're a therapist, do your research. If you're a veterinarian, do your research. So we have a tight line with what we do, that when we espouse something, when we say something, just believe that there is a plethora of research at the bottom of that. So I wanted to say that, right? Before, just like even Karis. Karis is, we're at different stages. Dr. Riffy finished her doctorate before me. I love, okay, she's my daughter, so I'm proud. But I'm just saying. And I am at the end of mine, and Karis is entering, she's matriculating into college. Why is that important? Because when we decided to come together, one of the things we said, even in talking about disparities, we don't just want to come to you from the chest. Yeah. What do I mean by that? Of course I have feelings as a Black therapist, a Black woman, a Black mom, but sometimes I have to kind of put them in neutral. So I'm able to broaden what I see and let the research speak. So with all of that backdrop, I am going to say definitively, because I've done research on it and I present it. If you are an African American, you're a pastor, you're a counselor, you're a therapist, please, and you have Christian underpinnings, please go check out the American Association of Christian Counselors, AACC. So I'm a part of, the American Board of Counselors. I'm on the American Counseling Association. I'm on the board for my state as a graduate committee representative. So it is important to bring that voice and that research to the table. So let me say this, so well thought out. The first line of defense, and we're going to get into this next week, for African American, for Black people, when they get into distress, is the church. It is founded, it is researched, and in just a basic vernacular, it is what it is. That has been, over the span of our history, the church has been the safe place. It has been the place where we gather, because we are community. It has been the place where there was found equality. So when we stood in those churches, we were all then equal. And so we have learned in the behavioral health community, and more specifically clinical mental health, that the first line of defense, when there's going to be this, a life interruption can happen. And I'll give you an example. Oh, my cancer diagnosis. I'm so comfortable talking about that. Not mine. The cancer diagnosis that I received. Yeah. So that was a life interruption. Vertical. Remember we talked about vertical stressors and horizontal stressors? Those verticals, things you can't do anything about. Well, I believe one of the first safe places I went after that diagnosis was church. I mean, that Sunday I had it. I went. I can see it now. I remember walking up and walking in the vicinity of a woman. And here's the thing: she was Caucasian, but I knew her. She was an ally in my life at that time. And I walked up to her, and she, in the church, near the front, was the first time I spoke about my diagnosis. So when I say the first line of defense for Black people when they hit crisis is the church, I say it experientially, I say it empirically.
And I think that when we look at the church, we have to talk about community.
Yes.
When we look at why is the first line what we're seeing for Black people is the church. We're such a communal group of people.
Yeah.
Even if there was no church involved, we're communing. We're getting together.
Right.
We're together a lot. And so if you're not faith-based and you're here, that's not to exclude you, because there are some Black people that aren't faith-based, even though a lot of us studies show lean that way. Find a community. Find your people to talk about these issues with. And whether it's mental health issues, whether it's healthcare issues, find your people. who do you go to talk to when you're feeling down? We're gonna have another stat that's gonna come up in a couple of weeks, just like the one with the 63%, that talks specifically about sadness and hopelessness. That a recent study they just did in the past year, this was probably pre-COVID, this is from the federal government stats, that people in the Black community are more likely than any other group to say that to report that they're feeling sad or hopeless.
Yes.
More than any group.
Yes.
Like more than any
Yes.
other group, we
Yes.
will report that we are sad or
Yes.
that we have no hope.
Yes. And Miss Belcher, I call you Miss Belcher, but it's my mom. I want to speak to that. He is a healer, absolutely. And so I want to just give this one backdrop on that. I went to two pivotal universities. I got my undergraduate degree at a HBCU. Norfolk State University, the whole green and gold for all my Spartan people, I have to say that. My graduate degree I got from Regent University, which is a Christian college that we studied clinical mental health counseling, but we studied it from a biblical underpinning.
Right.
I am so grateful that my licensure, foundation for my licensure came from a Christian college. And the reason why I'm grateful to that, Miss Belcher, is because God is a healer. And I gave the example in the first Wellness Wednesday that we did when we launched. You might want to go back and check that out. But I talked about how the woman that they brought to Jesus, the Pharisees, we're going to tip just a little bit over into this little piece. They brought her and they threw her at the feet of Jesus. Well, what did he do? If we know the story, he drew on the ground and he ignored everybody. And then he looked up after a time, and what did he say? You remember?
He who's without
Woman.
sin. When he first said he's without sin, throw the first stone.
Then he said,
And then he said, once everybody left, he said, women, where are your accusers?
woman, where is your accuser?
Right.
So this is how we gave this theological construct within clinical mental health. So for her, there was no one to antagonize her anymore. Her accusers were gone. And when they were gone and he finished, he told her to do what?
Go your way and sin no more.
Go your way. And so the deliverance, I'm not a pastor, and I tell people that I'm not a pastor. So the deliverance a lot of times in the African American community, or what we call, or we feel is deliverance, will happen in that spiritual experience. But just like it said in that scriptural space, go your way. So the word go is an action word. So when you go, he told her to go and he told her to do something. So now let's bring it back into clinical mental health. Say I have a substance use problem. But of course in church we don't have no problem with that. That's the thing, but we really, really do. Because it's a hospital for the sick. So the sick at heart. So if I had that alcohol problem, or if I had that problem with the alcohol, it says simply people, places, and things. That's the first principle of Alcoholics Anonymous. Change your people, places, or things. Well, that sounds kind of like go your way and sin no more. When she goes, she's got to do something different. Right. Because if she left him,
she keeps saying that same old thing. She's not going to sin no more.
Exactly.
That's just it.
So here is the thing, Mom, that I'm talking about. So yes, he is a healer. He will deliver you, but you got to stay there. You have got to stay. You got to do your work. Your work comes out of your will. That's a whole other thing. Then I'll say I'm not a pastor, but I was raised like in biblical principles. And so I really believe the best thing that could have happened to me as a Christian that counsels, and the reason why I say I'm a Christian that counsels instead of a Christian counselor is because I don't want to close the door to anybody.
Yeah.
So now let me go ahead and sit in the uncomfortable place with some of my Christian friends and people and loved ones and whatever. If you're a Buddhist, come on. If you're an atheist, come on. I don't want to stop anybody from coming, but here's the thing. When you come, you're going to be privy to whatever moves in, through, and out of me as a conduit. So I'm gonna have an unconditional positive regard. However, I'm gonna have a knowing that if you to be healed is not my job. Jesus, the Lord God, in my faith, in my belief, is a healer mom. You have to remain here. You have to walk it out. So that is where where we're going to talk about this next week. That is where the cross and the couch intersect.
Yeah. And we have to talk about it when we're talking about this. Yes, mental and spiritual together. There is an intertwined. It intertwines. It wraps in each other, and we can't talk about one without really talking about the other. They do often go together, and so we're gonna get. There's so much we can get into with that. So we want to get into that more. I think next week.
Yeah.
But I think the biggest things that we want to get across, and I just want to speak to that personal weakness because that's what started us off today.
Yeah.
The biggest thing we want to get across is if you are struggling right now with anything, it's hard with mental illnesses sometimes because they cannot be seen by the naked eye. And so it's easier to look at somebody and be like, wow, your arm is broken, you must be in pain. It's a lot harder to be empathetic towards people when you look at them and you can't see what's ailing them, but it still hurts. Yeah. And pain is the great equalizer.
Oh, yeah.
Everybody has pain. I don't care where you've been, who you are, who you saw, who you talked to. If you're Christian, not Christian, no matter where you're from, if you're living on this earth, you have experienced a bit of pain at different degrees, some more than others. But I want to say that if you are experiencing any type of pain, sadness, depression, hopelessness, it is not a personal failing.
It's not a spiritual failing.
It's not a spiritual failing. We got to talk about that next week. We got to talk about it. It's not a failing on your part. You have not failed. You just get connected with good counselors, good community, good friends, good family. Make sure the people around you are speaking positive things over you, are speaking life over you, are encouraging you. But we want to tell you from us sitting on this couch, you're worth it. Yeah. There's been we've had a lot with suicide lately, just in general, calls and things like that, people calling us depressive things, especially after 2020, we've seen that quite a bit at our office. And so we just need to say that right now, no matter where you sit, you are important. Yeah. If you haven't heard that today, you black woman are important. You black man are important. Period.
You black child
are important.
Period.
You are important.
Yeah.
You are seen. You are worthy no matter what you do. Yeah. You are deserving of care, and we want to make sure you get that care. So tune in with us in the upcoming weeks. Karis is going to give us a few of her Karis tips before we close out for today.
I'm actually going to go over here so I can see. So our first Karis tip for you today is to acknowledge, basically acknowledge that seeking mental health is not a weakness.
Yes.
You just explained this just now, but just because you are struggling in an area does not make you weak. Does not make you less than, just because you're seeing some sort of struggle in your life. You want to make sure that if you see that you have a friend or a family member who's struggling, that you're checking in on those people. Just like we were talking about earlier, we are, black people tend to be a community where we like to stay in communities, and so it's good to be able to check on people. My mom, when I went through a very hard time, she used to have to come and check on me. They're not always going to come to you. Yeah. And sometimes you have to extend
that more time. I wish we had so much more time.
We're going to mess around and do an hour one time this week. This month or something.
I wish we had more time, because that is true. Yeah. Do be mindful that make sure you're reaching out to people, but sometimes you got to be the one to reach. Sometimes if you're really feeling down, you might have to be the one to say, okay, I'm going to reach. But anyway, Karis, keep going.
And I can say, just to branch off of that, during that time, I didn't want to reach out to anybody because I didn't make me feel weak. Yeah, I was like, I felt more like a burden if I was reaching out to people. But in order to get that help, the first step is reaching out and finding that help.
Don't do it alone. I think that is literally probably don't do life alone. Do not do life alone.
Yeah.
Everyone, no matter where you're from or what you've been through, you function better in community. I promise you. You need human interaction.
Yes.
You need it.
Yes.
You need human interaction to thrive.
Yes.
You might be able to survive without other people, but can you thrive? Other people, they sharpen us. Wouldn't you say?
Yes.
Like sometimes that when we get with other like-minded people, we often grow.
Definitely.
We often thrive.
And that takes us into our third point, which is connect with your community.
Yeah.
You know, sometimes when you get in that sad space, you might want to stay in your little bubble. But it's good to stretch out your legs and stretch out your arms and go and be with people who are like you and understand.
Yeah. And I will say this too, and I believe this with all my heart. I believe this because I know this to be true. The greatest strength is to be able to acknowledge, embrace, and in safe, trusted space. Let me say that again.
In safe, trusted space.
Share your vulnerability.
Yeah.
It takes a certain amount of strength to show your vulnerability. And I would like to leave off tonight, before you take us out of the segment, I would like to say that one of the things I can remember thinking this back in 1990, I'm dating myself again, hopping to the AAL pre-card again. For decades, I thought this. When I hit times of adversity, when I hit times of challenge, there is one thing I say to myself, and I have said to my children over the years: you are not the sum of your circumstances.
Absolutely.
You are not. This is something, I don't care if you caused it. I don't care if you made the most jacked up decision and it got you in the most jacked up place. I live by something called grace. No matter if it's that, you are not the sum of your circumstances. That's just a part of you.
Right.
It is not the whole of you. And among us as family and at our practice at Ascend, we believe in everything whole, everything well, and everything optimal for ourselves and for you. I cannot tell you the countless people that have sat in my office and cried and said, "Oh my God, just didn't pray."
Right. That's devastating.
That
That breaks my heart. You know, maybe I didn't pray enough.
They feel it to be a spiritual failing. And I will say to my to our non-white people, non-black people, the white people that are watching us, hang out with us, stay with us. Like, how difficult is it for me? And I'm just gonna drop this little bomb and leave it alone. How difficult is it for me that there's 1 month in the year that I just feel unbridled in my tongue about being black? There's 11 other months that we need you to come alongside, lock arms with us, and just do the work. This time, the difference, and I'm research-based, but the difference between, with everything that's going on in this world, please don't think that people are not impacted. The difference between the civil rights movement of the I think it went from 54 till about 68. The difference between that movement and what is going on today is the way people are listening. The way people, not just white people, not just black people, not just Hispanic people, the way we all are listening is a command. It is in our face. It is daily, and it is causing rifts, it's causing disparities, it's increasing disparities, if that makes sense. So it is not as though that the only person that can serve a person in the black community is a black therapist or a black doctor or a black dentist. It's not that. It's just that because of the tapestry and history that it just is. There is a certain amount of mistrust that is set up, that those barriers, community barriers, have to be broken. And we would be remiss to be, and I will say this, not as an atta-girl, but as a fact. When you look on the doctoral level, when you look in the graduate student level, I know on the doctoral level, 1% of the population has a doctoral degree, between 1 and 3%. Just guess how many of that percent is a brown person, is a yellow person, is a black person. So
It's
it
not
is,
for a lack of
it's not for
the
a
intellectual ability to be able to do it.
it's because of disparities, it's because of inequality.
Barriers.
So I agree with my dear friend, Krista Meredith, when she said there needs to be representation. So you guys just hang out with us and we'll talk about it. We have our inbox at Ascend Wellness. If you've listened to tonight and you're like, I think we need to talk about this,
Yeah.
especially if you're not a part of the Black community. It's something that you don't understand. I promise we'll bring it to the forefront, not just from our feelings, not just from what we think or what we've been taught all our life, but we'll go out and we do the work and we'll look it up and we'll close those gaps to unify us to be able to all serve the Black community.
So we love you guys this week. Like, share, comment. We want to hear what you guys think about this topic that we're talking about. It sounds like next week we're going to be talking about, what is it?
The cross and the couch.
The cross and the couch. So we want you guys to join in with us, and we're going to talk in. We'll see if we can get some of our pastor friends to come and put their input
that'd be
in.
so